Welcome to the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce Legislative and Economic Forecast. Before we begin, here are some housekeeping items. Please utilize the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit questions to speakers and panelists if time permits. The session will have live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. To access these features, please select the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. If you have any technical questions, please dial 916-444-2221. Again, the phone number is 916-444-2221. Please welcome to the webinar stage the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce President and CEO, Julian Cañete.
Good morning and welcome everyone to the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce 2022 Legislative and Economic Forecast. First, I would like to thank our sponsors who make this event possible, but not only for their support for this event, but throughout the year in working with the State Hispanic Chamber on business and policy issues that affect California and our small business community. And at this time, I'd like to thank T-Mobile, our friends at the California Strawberry Commission, WISPA, Western States Petroleum Association, and Airbnb. Thank you for their support and thank you for their continued collaboration with the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce on important issues that impact California's economy. The CHCC Legislative and Economic Forecast will provide you insight to issues, economic, business, and policy issues that we will face in this next legislative session in 2022, including new programs that are out there to help stimulate the economy and grow business. We anticipate a dynamic panel discussion to identify these policy and market-based solutions to some of California's greatest economic and social challenges. Our panelists today are leaders across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors and will provide you with opportunities and information on how legislation and the economy work in tandem to drive policies that empower local economies throughout the state of California. And at this time, I'd like to welcome our moderator for today, who will introduce the panel, the chairman of the board of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, Bob Gutierrez. Bob?
Thank you, Julian. So welcome everybody. I'm Bob Gutierrez. I'm the chairman of the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And today you're going to hear from some great panelists. If you haven't had a chance already, please take a look at their bios. Quite an impressive group that will be speaking to us today, as Julian said, on policy and business resiliency, as well as our future forecasts in the economy. So here in California. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. We have Dee Dee Myers, a senior advisor to Governor Gavin Newsom and director of GoBiz. We've got Micah Weinberg, chief executive officer for the California Forward. We have Samjit Mitra, chief economist for the California Department of Finance. And we have Rob Lapsley, president of the California Business Roundtable. Thank you all for making the time to be here today. We certainly appreciate your partnership and the work that you do on an annual basis with us. And so we're really looking forward to the message that you'll be providing our audience today. Today, we're going to talk about the economy in California and kind of our future, our path forward and where we've been post-COVID. And so with that, I'd like to ask Dee Dee Myers to kind of kick us off with some opportunities that are going on in the state. Maybe talk a little bit about access to capital to start off with, Dee Dee.
Well, thank you, Bob. It's really good to be here, and it's good to be with my fellow panelists. So hi, Micah. Hi, Rob. Hi, Samjita. It's always good to be with you all. My name is Dee Dee Myers, as Bob said, and I run the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GoBiz. And we consider ourselves the business community's portal to state government, the concierge services, if you will. We offer a wide range of services that many of you may already be familiar with, including attraction, retention, and expansion of businesses and services to support them. We help with site selection, permit streamlining, clearing regulatory hurdles, small business assistance, international trade development, assistance with state government. We have the iBank, which is our infrastructure and development bank, which provides low-cost loans to a lot of businesses, and more. So our door is always open, and we're always here to help the chamber and all of you with whatever your business needs are. So let me just talk a little bit about the business environment. As you all know, it's not just a slogan, it's a fact. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and they're critical to the success of our state. And we've seen that before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and it will be true as we come out of the pandemic. And we know that Latino small business owners are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the country. So very proud of that. We recognize the challenges. The pandemic has been really difficult for everybody. And despite the availability of vaccines and improved access to testing, there's still a lot of uncertainty. New variants, winter surge, all make for a challenging business environment. In May of 2020, 86% of Latino business owners felt immediate negative impacts of COVID. That was higher than any other ethnic group. And help was harder to come by. Latino businesses just had less access to programs like PPP and other kinds of federal support, and we hope not state support. But we know the impacts that it had on working age Latinos, among others. I mean, there's studies that have confirmed that in California, like in many other parts of the country, working age Latinos, those 20 to 54, died from COVID at a significantly higher rate than their white counterparts. And even now that vaccines and boosters are widely available, we're still seeing a significant lag, as Latinos are the lowest vaccinated group. They have the lowest vaccination rate of any group in California. So, and that's especially true among the younger crowd. So we need to continue to address that. Yet, despite all those challenges, we need to also take advantage of this opportunity to move forward. Because prior to the pandemic, Latino entrepreneurs were making great strides, right? And I think many of you felt it. Your businesses were experiencing increases in funding. You were seeing improvement in credit, improvement in revenue growth. And in fact, 2019, 2020, before the pandemic, was a record-breaking year for Latino entrepreneurs. The average annual revenue for your businesses increased 10% to over $525,000 annually. So that was, great momentum. And that's been obviously interrupted, but not stopped, we hope, by events of the last year. And in fact, I think what we're seeing is the underlying strength of the Latino business community, coupled with an entrepreneurial spirit and a work ethic that the community is very well known for, will be instrumental as we come through this pandemic, not just stronger and more resilient, but better than ever. So to that end, we can't let our guard down yet. We know the coronavirus isn't done with us yet, as I mentioned earlier. Again, with a lot of activity shifting indoors with the holidays, colder weather, more traveling, more mixing, and the appearance of the Omicron variant, really had the California state health officials concerned. And so, as you saw earlier this week, the governor re-implemented a statewide mask mandate to ensure that we don't allow the spread of the variant to get ahead of us again, that we keep both, not just people from getting sick, but keep our hospitals from becoming overwhelmed, protect our healthcare system. And that really is the primary reason for the implementation of the mask mandate. And so we just need to keep on with these sensible precautions, but we also need to keep on with the kinds of strategic and sensible investments that we've made across the pandemic and will continue to make into the future. You probably saw that earlier this year, the governor signed basically a transformational budget, a once-in-a-lifetime budget, because despite the pandemic, we saw a huge surplus in our state funds, which gave us an opportunity to invest in new and really meaningful ways. The most important for us at GoBiz, where we also have the Office of Small Business Advocate, we created a grant program, the Small Business Relief Grant Program, which has provided $4 billion in relief to small businesses across the state. And we targeted it specifically to those industries and those parts of the state that were most impacted by the pandemic. And we were very grateful. We've distributed most of that money now. Some of it's still going out, the last bits, but we've seen a very equitable distribution, which was very much a part of our goal, was to make sure that we got into those communities, again, who really had the hardest time. We also did something called the Main Street Small Business Tax Credit, which some of you may have applied for and benefited from. It was a $1,000 tax benefit for hiring new employees or hiring back existing employees, again, just to get people back to work and get those businesses back up and running. We have something called the California Venues Grant Program, which supplements a $16 billion federal fund for those theaters and other kinds of venues that had to shut down during the pandemic. So we want those to come back because they're not only employers and revenue drivers, but they drive businesses in surrounding communities that we know are important. We're in the process now of standing up our micro business grant program, and these are for the really small businesses who got totally left out of support. And those are grants up to $2,500, which will be distributed in the coming months, just again to help the smallest businesses that really just didn't have access to other supports. And we have something called the California Dream Fund, which is another new state grant program that provides micro grants of up to $10,000 for new businesses to seed those entrepreneurs who want to make a go of it. And we were very proud here in California that despite the pandemic in 2020, we saw a 20% increase, actually 21% increase in new business starts. And we think that's just such a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit of Californians, to their resilience, to the willingness to come up with new ideas. And we want to help invest in those new ideas going forward, replace some of those businesses that were lost to the pandemic, and keep that energy in the economy. And we thank all of you for everything you do that as well. So, you know, the Office of Small Business Advocate also runs a lot of programs to help our small businesses better navigate the resources and programs that are available and to navigate the regulations, which we know can sometimes be confusing. So there's a lot of technical assistance. We fund a network of small business technical assistance centers that provide no-cost one-on-one consulting and low-cost training services to small businesses and entrepreneurs with all stages, from startup plans to access to financing, entering new markets and strengthening operations and building resiliency. So if you haven't already, please visit calosba.ca.gov or give us a call to find a local center near you and get the kind of support that you might need that will help your business grow and thrive. We also have an Office of Business Investment Services. It's called CalBiz. And those are the folks who help with in-depth insight on available resources for probably larger entities, but also if people are trying to cite or expand a business, if they're navigating some of the regulations, if they're looking for tax incentives for larger entities, that's there as well. So that's just kind of an overview of the programs that we run, the access to everything from grants to capital to technical support and assistance that can help businesses thrive and grow, and again, hire people and create the jobs that are the backbone of our economy. As we know, small businesses in California employ more than half of private sector employees. It is truly what drives, and some of those small businesses become bigger businesses and become the new ideas that change the world. And so we want to make sure that everybody feels supported. And, you know, California continues to be a great place to do business. This has been a challenging year, and sometimes things here are complicated, but we have a marketplace of 40 million people. We have the most innovative economy. We have the best higher education system in the world, not only UCs, but also our Cal States and our community colleges. And those really do help fuel our innovation, create new opportunities, and help people move into that next phase of their life and their work. We have the most diverse and high quality workforce in the nation, which all of you are a part of. We have more engineers, more scientists, more researchers. We also have an unparalleled sort of set of regional clusters here and more industries. So whether it's aerospace or agriculture or biotech or clean tech or entertainment or high tech or travel and tourism, restaurants, you name it, we have it all here. And we want to make sure that we continue to create an environment in California where businesses can survive and thrive. We're also a leader in two-way trade, right? And of course, our biggest trading partner both ways is Mexico, but all of Latin America. Foreign direct investment supports more than 5 million jobs. And we're also the world's gateway to and from the United States. So more than 40% of our cargo comes in through the ports of LA and Long Beach. You've probably been reading a lot about that lately. We've had some challenges, but what we've seen is an increased volume of goods moving around the world. They're coming through California. We need to make sure that we get through the current crisis so that that continues to be a great source of economic growth and strength, and something that I hope many of you can continue to take advantage of. Every now and then people, complain about taxes here in California. I want to say one final thing. The governor is not interested in raising taxes. There will be no increase in income taxes. There will be no increase in corporate tax, and there will be no personal wealth tax in California. I think we have the resources we need to continue to invest in the businesses, large and small, to continue to invest in things like schools from, TK. We now have universal TK that we're standing up in California all the way through to our great higher education system. We're going to do that cleanly, and we're going to do that equitably. We're going to continue to invest not only in transitioning to a green economy, but we're going to do it in a way that's equitable to the communities who've sometimes been, or too often been, adversely impacted. But that's going to create great new opportunities for businesses like yours to thrive and to grow. So that's just a quick overview. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and then answering any questions that you might have. So thanks, and back over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Well said, great information, a wealth of knowledge. Dee Dee Myers from the governor's office, thank you so much. We'll get back to you in a few minutes. Michael Weinberg, let's talk about California Forward, its mission, and tell us a little bit about SURF.
Sure, we'll go surfing here in a little bit. And just to kind of frame things up for people, I wanted to pick up on this theme of positivity that was a part of Director Myers' results. It's extraordinarily important not to gloss over racial inequities, extraordinarily important to understand how structural discrimination works, and it's extraordinarily important to celebrate the Latino success story economically in California and in the rest of the United States. And I think that if we do gloss over that, if we do not acknowledge that, nationwide incomes among Hispanic families have actually grown at a quicker rate than incomes of any other ethnic group recently. Dee Dee mentioned the statistics around Latino entrepreneurs in the state of California. Another piece is that more than any other ethnic group, Hispanics in the United States are more likely to say that they are better off than their parents, right? So there is a lot of, again, important to acknowledge structural discrimination, but also important to acknowledge progress and acknowledge success. And there's so much progress and so much success to acknowledge in the Hispanic community nationwide, the Latino community in California, the set of entrepreneurs and businesses in our state. So I just want to ground in that as we talk about this a little bit today. California Forward, thanks for having me back. We're a movement to make the state's economy and government work for everyone in all of the state's regions, all of our very, very diverse regions. We have two of the world's largest 20 economies right here in the regions of California. So what we call regions, really other places would call at least states, if not countries. And understanding the diversity of our state, understanding that every part of our state is diverse in different ways, I think is really essential. And that's our mission at California Forward. And we work with a group of partners in what we call our California Stewardship Network, that are all across the state, from the Redwood Coast to the Imperial Valley, really trying to make their regions work for everyone. This year was, as Director said, just a once in a two generations maybe budget, and we didn't just spend more money because solving problems isn't just about spending more money. Sort of news flash, perhaps, to folks in California. But what's exciting about this year is that we spent money in different ways that I think will be very good for the Latino community in California. Historic investments in broadband, just necessary to get people connected to school, get businesses connected to their customers, and so on. $6 billion plus. The amount of money that the feds are spending, on broadband through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act is a rounding error compared to what we're spending here in California. That is very exciting. Historic investments in managing our forests in different ways. The smoke from our unchecked wildfires has a tremendous impact on a lot of people, but on a lot of farm workers, on a lot of people in communities that have been put at risk by our policies. And so our state's historic investments in wildfires, I think, are going to directly translate into better outcomes for a lot of people around the state. But at California Forward, one of the things that we feel is not really on the state's agenda as much as it needs to be is wealth creation, right? Ultimately, wealth creation is important for its own sake. It's also related to power in society. It is very difficult to have true equity, true equality across society if there are substantial differentials in wealth. And so we've been focusing a lot on California Forward in areas like home ownership, in areas like capital access for small businesses owned by people of color, because ultimately, people need to be able to accumulate wealth to really have that equity in society. And we're just not. With home ownership, right? We do all these various different programs around affordable, housing and so on, and that's all wonderful. But ultimately, if we don't build housing at scale, we are not, making housing available for home ownership in the way that created generational wealth, primarily for Caucasians in the middle of the 20th century, wealth that, other communities were locked out of. And, we built a bunch of homes back then. We're not building a bunch of homes now. And that has significant implications for racial wealth inequality. And then also, business ownership. I think I may have said this before. Complexity is the enemy of equity, right? The problem with our regulatory environment in California is not that we have standards. The problem with our regulatory environment in California is not that we like the environment and like equality. The problem with our regulatory environment in California is that it's a freaking mess. It is really, really, really difficult to navigate for any business owner. But small business owners don't have a phalanx of lawyers to throw at, whatever sort of situation arises. And I think we just need to think much, much more in California about reducing the complexity, the essentially series of trapdoors or minefields or whatever you want to think about it, that a business owner needs to walk through like any day in order to continue to, serve their community in whatever way their business does and create wealth for their families. So those are some of our main priorities. And so then I'll just wrap up with a little bit of surfing. What is the surf? This is oh man, I'm so excited about this. So we passed, and I just remembered, I am so sorry. I need to slow down for the simultaneous translation. I get so excited about these issues and so excited to be here. So, all right, I will adapt going forward. But basically, the Community Economic Resilience Fund is a $600 million investment by the state of California. About 50 million of this is going to be setting up, processes to plan for a substantially more equitable and sustainable economy in the different regions of our state. These processes are required to be inclusive. They have to have the business community at the table. They have to have the equity community, the environmental justice community, organized labor, coming together and planning for a better future. And then there is another $500 million to implement the plans that come out of these convenings. Because we've all gone to a lot of convenings. And sometimes you go to that table, you're a business owner, and people are, whether it's a community college or whether it's some other group, you're asked to come and, you're very, very busy running your business. And then you wonder, did it matter that I was here? Did my input as a business owner really change policy? Well, here, just for starters, there's $500 million to implement the projects that come out of these plans. But that's not the big game. The big game is reorienting our spending in so many areas. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, community college curricula, you name it, around creating a better future together. And so that's just what I will end on. And that is that this is actually the only way a better future ever happens. It only ever happens when we look around the communities that we are in, the tables that we are at, the legislatures that we participate in. If we look around and we say, these people are fundamentally unlike me and I need to fight them in order to win, everyone loses. I am a political scientist by training and have been studying economic development for years. We won't go into how many. And that's the reality. When communities come together and business community, equity community, labor, and plan for a better future together, it's great to have programs like the SURF. But no policy is going to save us. No policy is going to make us work together in a different way. We have to be committed to that. And that's the thing I'm the most excited about related to the Community Economic Resilience Fund, and happy to dig into more of the details in the questions. Thank you so much, Bob.
Micah, that's great. And before we move on to our next panelists, I just want to thank Micah and Director Myers, because really what Micah just said is setting the tone and rebooting the culture of how we work together as regions. And I think the SURF program and others that the director are putting forward, with this surplus and the one-time monies and the regional approach are becoming quite effective. And again, I'm seeing a lot of positive, equity involvement in the chambers of commerce and our EDCs, our business partners, our educational institutions, and then seeing the philanthropic foundations, as well as the state and organizations like Micah, all working together for this equity approach. And so I just want to thank both of you for aligning, because that's not something that you see or have seen traditionally. We all have our individual silos that end up being worked through, and this, now we're all working together. And this is a great opportunity to continue that forward. So thank you, Micah, for your work, and Director Myers for helping establish that throughout the state as well. Let's move on to Mr. Lapsley from the California Business Roundtable. You can talk a little bit about the organization, what are some of the initiatives we can look forward to in 2022 that you're working on, and how we can work together with our chambers of commerce. And Rob, we still have you on mute, sorry.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity, Chairman Gutierrez, to be with you today. When I have an opportunity like this to be able to also hear from my fellow panelists, it always gives me, that renewed optimism on how exciting California is and the great opportunity, of where we are as a state and as a people to be able to truly lead the nation, in what's coming for our future generations. And, for my kids, for other kids, when I look at the talent and the diversity and just the truly visionary thinking that goes on here through our economy and, hopefully with partners as governments, for all of us, there isn't another place that we would rather be. With that, for the California Business Roundtable, we have a shared responsibility from my board members, who are medium and large businesses, to be able to look at our challenges so that we can achieve the promise that is in front of us of everything that goes on with that great diversity and talent. And so if I could, I was going to mention just a few of the challenges that we are tracking on a couple different fronts, but saying that the challenges being one that we are all committed to confronting and working together on, Mr. Chairman, as you just said, and how we can continue to build a better California moving forward. So from an economic standpoint, obviously, we are all now focused on this continued recovery. We have still an uncertain economy when you look at, what is happening in key sectors, particularly lower income sectors, how we help them recover. Dee Myers, I thought, outlined perfectly so many of the different programs that they are working so hard to achieve to be able to provide assistance in those sectors and others. But as we know, it's a lot of work. It takes all of us. So underneath that, I want to be clear, appreciate the governor's perspective on that as he confronts the pandemic. Right now, he is not focused on more shutdowns. I mean, we are seeing some of that in Europe. We believe that if we had another shutdown, it would be, frankly, almost catastrophic to our current recovery in where we are today and what we need to do to help Latino businesses, small businesses, lower income sectors. But as we know, all businesses would be impacted. So that perspective from the governor, making determinations on mask mandates instead of shutdowns, we can all live with that if that's what it takes to be able to keep our recovery moving forward. And so, that is a very, I think, important consideration for all of us as we deal with some of the frustrations, in meeting the mitigations for COVID and other things, but everything that, especially Latino businesses, have done so well to do the best they can with complying with all the different rules and the costs associated with that. So other challenges, we're watching now the supply chain pieces with the current, impact on what is happening with, from obviously the Far East and what is happening to be able to move our goods throughout the country, the associated increase in costs with that. That is something that obviously the federal government is undertaking, the governor is helping, but we have a lot of work to do to be able to drive some of the solutions that will truly try and end some of the backlog as quickly as possible. So a lot to come on that it's going to take all of us in 2022. Inflation now, obviously being addressed at the federal level, and it is, but it does impact California, it impacts all of us. All businesses. So, with that quickly rising inflation, when you look at that inflation coupled with, the impacts of potentially other policies, maybe we need to look at some of the other policies to ensure that as they move forward, it will also account for inflation when they make decisions on how far, how fast, and how much. So, for example, energy. The state is transforming our economy through energy policy. As you look at what's happening with especially solar and wind and with electric vehicles, all exciting, dynamic, progress. But there are and is unintended consequences, and that plays out for costs for business and what you pay for your energy. We pay the highest industrial energy rates in the country. We have the highest residential rates now in the country, especially when you consider whether you're going to run your air conditioning or not, in your business or at your home. We have flex alerts every day. Use your power after 8 o'clock. I mean, so there's real impacts now that we have to take into consideration together as a business community to articulate to the governor so they have good data, good feedback with some of my panelists, so that we can do things in the right way or make adjustments to these policies as they move forward. Obviously other things, schools, we are concerned about for the workforce of the future. As we come out of the pandemic, a lot of work to do there. Housing, as my colleague, Mr. Weinberg, talked about for wealth creation. We also have as a state extremely high litigation costs, but all those things are recognized, so we're working together. Now, moving forward, I want to and clearly state our thanks to the Hispanic Chamber for your incredible help and support in defeating Proposition 15, a $14 billion property tax increase last November. And the reason I want to be clear about that is with Julian, your leadership on this, with the community, for the businesses, both together, we were able to defeat one of the most fatally flawed measures that would have increased everyone's property taxes and started to essentially break Proposition 13 for our long-term future, the only tax protection literally we have left. Now, in saying that, that's also important because there's another split roll property tax coming. Dee Dee said very clearly the governor is not going to raise taxes, and we appreciate that sincerely. That does not mean that other interest groups are not interested in raising taxes in the face of what is at least going to be a $30 billion surplus. So how do we raise taxes with that kind of surplus? The ballot for 2022 is going to have proposals to do that. One, another split roll property tax. We're going to be in this fight all over again. And we're going to need your help all over again together. Only this one purported to raise 18 or $20 billion, not 14. We are going to be facing a major proposal on the ballot to raise corporation and personal income taxes to be able to fund electric vehicle charging stations. We need to fund those, there's no question. We have a state surplus. We have other revenues currently, coming into the state to do that. But another major tax, two taxes, to be able to fund that makes no sense. And ladies and gentlemen, as we know, if these things pass, you pay it, or obviously you have to pass it on to your customers. So all Californians pay it, which is why California has right now the second highest cost of living in the country. And that is a major challenge for us. The last thing to wrap up is kind of a hidden secret, but that's going to be coming to the forefront. After the pandemic, our unemployment insurance costs now means that all businesses are going to be facing a $52 billion tax increase to pay off the cost for unemployment insurance benefits. Things many of you deal with every day in your business and the costs associated with that. What that breaks down to is $22 billion from the state, $30 billion at the federal level. And so that is going to be over $300 per employee if we do not get our arms around how this gets paid off. Many other states are using federal money that they are getting for the pandemic to help pay it down. We are looking forward to having a discussion with the governor and the legislature to get out in front of this right away, to be able to address how this is going to get paid so it does not fall on every business in the state to pay it, particularly medium and small businesses. So a lot to come on this issue. It's not getting much attention yet, but we are intent on trying to drive solutions on this because it is a huge issue facing the entire statewide business community. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, with all of your members, our colleagues today. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thank you for all your good work that you're doing and that informational update there. Certainly look forward to more to come on that. So just bear with us. We'll get back to Q&A shortly. But again, thank you for all the work you're doing. We're going to move on to Samjeet. And Samjeet, let's talk about what's going on with the California Finance Department and some of the forecasts that we're looking at. We're hearing about all this funding that's coming about. And so how does your role fit into that? And what are some of the initiatives you're working on in your department?
Thank you, Bob. It's Samjeeta.
Samjeeta, sorry.
It's okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues on this very important panel to discuss what we're seeing coming forward in 2022. So the California Department of Finance, we're the state's control agency. We are the official fiscal policy advisor for the governor, and we're also responsible for sustainable and responsible resource allocation of the state's budget to all the state agencies. And of course, that means in this time of a state surplus that we see this once in a lifetime opportunity, what would be the best allocation of that money for us for the economic recovery now, but also to protect ourselves in the future for various economic downturns, potential future pandemics, and things like that. So my job, I'm the chief economist, and I lead the economic research unit, and we provide the official state economic forecast twice a year. The next one's going to be released by January 10th with the governor's budget. And then also in the May revision, which is going to be after the governor and the legislators work out what they want to do with the state's budget. That comes out in May. And I also research the California economy and provide economic indicators and economic policy to the general public, state agencies, and the governor's office. So, just really quickly to set the stage, right before the pandemic hit, we were in the longest economic expansion in history. We had over 10 years of consecutive job growth, and California alone was responsible for 1 out of every 7 jobs that were created in the United States post-Great Recession, which up until this pandemic recession was the worst recession we had seen in our lifetimes. And so California had created 1 out of 7 jobs. We were, and we continue to be the 5th largest economy in the world, which is extraordinary, considering how relatively small we are compared to other countries. We have, just about 40 million people and just about 19 million in our labor force. And so the pandemic hit. So right before the pandemic hit, we were at historic low unemployment rate of 4.3% in California. And generally between 3 to 5% is considered full employment, which means that anybody who wants a job has a job. The quality of the job is a different issue, but it generally means we are doing pretty well. And so we were at a historic low unemployment rate of 4.3%. And then the pandemic hit and everything kind of shut down, both on the demand side and the supply side. And so our unemployment rate shot up to 16% in April in just 2 months, which is the depth of that shock and the depth of that increase in the unemployment is unprecedented. And we saw this, this was actually the worst recession for us since the Great Depression of the 1930s. That's how bad this was. And if you saw how much our job losses were, it's a deep, deep V. And so 16% unemployment rate with an extraordinary unknown about what the pandemic meant. Back then, we didn't know the coronavirus, how to deal with it. We were just completely in the dark, the whole entire world. But just as quickly as the recession hit us, we've also been able to bounce back relatively quickly. And that's because the fundamentals of our economy were still in place before the pandemic hit. We had all the tools in place for our economic growth. And despite, the increasing inequality in our state that's just been exacerbated by this pandemic, everything else in our state was chugging right along. And so we had all the tools in place. So once we realized how we had to deal with this pandemic, whether it was 6 feet apart, wearing masks, restructuring some of how we do our businesses, we were able to kind of recover. And so in October of this past 2 months ago, which is our latest economic data, the November data comes out on Friday, if you're interested. Our unemployment rate fell to 7.5% in California, which is still like 3 percentage points higher than we were pre-pandemic, but less than half of where we were at the height of the pandemic. So we were hit really hard, but our recovery has also been relatively fast, considering how badly we were hit by the recession. And so we're slowly, we have about 886,000 fewer people in non-farm employment than we had pre-pandemic. So it's just about getting them back into the employment. We also have 400,000 fewer people in our labor force. So one of the issues has been, people not working, in this recession, in this pandemic, and we still have about almost 500,000 people that are out of the labor force, which means that they are either not working or they're not looking for work. And there's various reasons for that. One of the primary ones is the school system. It's parents needing childcare for their children and not being able to access that, and that's been an issue. also access to public transportation in a pandemic. And a lot of the jobs lost in this pandemic, 3 out of the 4 jobs that were lost were in the low wage sectors, the sectors that were least able to sustain this job losses. And so those are the ones that are, our recovery is taking a little bit longer in those, just because it's so much harder. And a lot of those low wage sectors are those public facing jobs, the other services, the retail sector, the leisure and hospitality sector. And so those recoveries is taking longer because there's a lot of uncertainty about the pandemic, public health, and there's also, a lack of hours and pay in those sectors that makes it difficult, especially for parents who lack access to childcare, to kind of plan ahead for how they're going to take care of their kids. So all of these issues kind of are coming into play, but we are seeing recovery. It's slow and steady for us. We've last month, or in October, California added over 90,000 jobs, which has been the 7th month in this last year that we've added over 90,000 jobs monthly. And our historic share of US employment has been about 12%. And then in the last month, we've added about 18% of all the jobs that were added in the country. So yes, we have a long way to go in terms of our economic recovery, but we are chugging right along. And we are seeing job growth in every large industry sector except for government. And a lot of those job losses in government are because of the school system. Schools are opening, they're shutting down, they're opening, they're shutting down. So there's been a lot of job losses in that. And in trying to understand what that's happening is going to be one of our issues moving forward. But in terms of what I am seeing for the economy, it's slow and steady recovery. As my colleagues on this panel mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities in California. We are the innovation capital of the world. We have the tech sector. We have a thriving entrepreneurial spirit driven a lot by our immigrant population as well. And I think right now is a time to think of it as a great reset for us. As I mentioned, we had seen a lot of inequality pre-pandemic that's been exacerbated by this pandemic, but now we can all work together, like my colleagues mentioned, and make some changes for the future. Like, this is our time. This is like a forced shutdown of everything, so we can do a great reset. And I feel like it's an exciting time for us. It's a challenging time because, especially with the pandemic still not going away as we hoped, especially with the new variants, but it is a time for thriving. And I feel like California is the state that makes it happen, and it's going to lead the rest of the country in what we do moving forward. Thank you.
Sanjita, thank you so much. That was great information. Really appreciate that, and look forward to you participating in the Q&A here. So thank you. So we're going to go on to Director Myers. We're going to have some questions come up, but I wanted to ask you a couple before we got started with that. We have several chamber representatives that are here that provide technical assistance throughout the state. And those are some of the pots of funds that are available moving forward. How do we prepare our local chambers for applying for those funds? What's the best course in doing so? And who can we work with, and where can we go to make that happen?
Yeah, you can reach out to Cal OSBA, who will help, is responsible for setting up the guidelines, right? And then providing both information through things like webinars and website information, and then actually providing technical assistance to make sure that people are applying, making sure that they check all the boxes and provide all the information to make sure the applications are seamless. So again, go to business.ca.gov, and that's the portal to all of GoBiz. And you'll find information about those kinds of programs and where to go. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll direct you to the right place.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. And your regional advocates have been, a huge benefit, I think, to participation with the state and local communities. So, thank you for all your direction that you're providing there. And having that, we appreciate the governor's leadership, especially in helping define those areas and create those opportunities. So please share our thanks with him and the efforts that he's putting forward as well. We're certainly grateful for that.
Yeah, and Bob, let me just add a couple other, I know Mike had talked a lot about SURF. It's something we've been talking a lot about together. And we did stand up or put out what the 13 regions will be. And this is really intended to be a very inclusive process. And so this is another place where I think it's a little bit longer term in terms of regional economic development, but I think it's a great opportunity for the chambers to participate in the conversation, to help drive the direction of economic growth in these various sectors. And it's really meant to be a bottom-up inclusive process, which has never really happened in this form. And I think Micah talked a lot about the transformational nature of that. But again, I think that, and then there's another program that's we had earlier, was called iHub, innovation hubs, right? We're going to expand, and that will be administered regionally through some of our regional people in GoBiz. And so that will be another opportunity for people to to participate in regional economic development conversation, then apply for specific grants. So that's also coming.
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing up the iHub. I know in my local region, we're looking forward to continuing that service. Yeah. So great program, great opportunities, great opportunity to be inclusive and mindful about your local needs from a regional perspective. So great things all around, and working with the private sector as well. In my experience, my career, I've never seen something this well put together in a coalition format so much. And this is the first time we're really seeing it put to work. So thank you again for all you're putting in that leadership.
No, great to hear that you find it that's working from your perspective too. It's always good to know it's not just us looking out and seeing it work, but you guys looking back at us and telling us, and always open to ideas about how it can work better.
Absolutely appreciate that. Thank you, Director. We're going to have some Q&A come up, but before we do that, we've got a couple more minutes, and just want to give quick final thoughts from your respective departments before you go ahead and go into the Q&A. So, Director, is there anything you want to say before we go into the Q&A phase with the rest of the group?
I think the governor's, again, we've had another really good budget year, as we did last year, and Micah even said was once in every other generation. So we're excited to be able to, the governor's new budget will come out on January 10th. And I think it's another opportunity for us to invest, to make our economy more resilient, and to carry forward the programs that we started last year. And again, to adapt those to the changing needs as we move through the kind of pandemic. And I think, again, as everybody talked about, doing so equitably is really important. But I guess I think that despite the pandemic that never seems to end, I think there is a reason for optimism. And I think Sanjita captured that a lot. It's not a completely smooth recovery, but it is a steady and forward progress kind of recovery. And so I think between another good budget year, between the signs of the economy that we're seeing, some challenging and troubling notions, like I think Rob talked about inflation, and I know that's something that everybody's concerned about as we see everything from groceries to gas prices creeping up, and we see the Fed is taking some action today, so that's always helpful. But so one eye on some of the cautionary notes, commitment to solve some of the problems that we know are specific to California, the high cost of living and housing and things like that, while we also continue to lead the nation in transitioning to things that we know are absolutely essential for our future, which are things like clean energy, and that continuing entrepreneurial spirit. So I would say, as we close out this year, I think a lot of reasons to be hopeful, but absolutely no time to take our foot off the gas as we power through the recovery and make sure that we're continuing to invest in the kinds of businesses that are represented by the Chamber that will keep our economy humming well into the future. So just thank you for having me.
Thank you, Director. Dee Dee Myers, everyone, thank you. And Micah, a few thoughts from you, just real quick.
Well, I mean, I'm excited to dive into some of the questions, excited about being upbeat about the prospects for the future, while not being, unrealistic about the fact that there are significant headwinds. And in excited about California doing things in new ways, but it is, in addition to layering on new exciting things, we have to do the hard work of fixing the things about our system that are broken. And the problem is that work is not necessarily exciting when I talk about things like the complexity of the regulatory environment, right? When you have local and regional and state policies all conflicting with each other, and there's not a lot of political upside in doing it. So, there is a lot of boring, hard work that we need to do to really make sure that we're serving the businesses and communities of the state.
Well said, Micah. And that's why, as a statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, our number one priority is advocacy. So we appreciate that, and we're here to help navigate. So if you're a local chamber business owner, lean on your chambers to be that advocate for you, everyone. Thank you, Micah. Rob?
Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for the opportunity. So actually, I wanted to, if I could, close on one additional item. And actually, Director Myers mentioned it briefly earlier, but that was international trade, particularly with a focus on Mexico. So we are very excited. We have been doing some preliminary work and want to expand on it dramatically in 22, hopefully with GoBiz, but also with the Chamber, on establishing a kind of newly reinvigorated California-Mexico Business Council, and what that could entail for obviously our future economies and trade, business relationships, and a host of other pieces. We've been in discussions with the foreign ministry, with Mexico, about how we can start to build a plan to do that. So that's something we're going to be paying attention to. And I think it goes right at the heart of many, of the exciting issues that we're talking about for the Latino economy, and look forward to working with the Chamber and Ms. Myers and others to look at how we can build that moving forward for our long-term future. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Rob. Thank you. That's great and exciting altogether. Sanjita, go ahead and give us your final thoughts there.
Thank you, Bob. So, just as my colleague said, with the optimism, I think what this pandemic showed us is that we are capable of changing our behavior relatively fast. And, within just a couple of short months, everybody was wearing their masks, everybody was standing 6 feet apart, and really for the greater good, to protect ourselves and others around us. And I feel like if we take that mentality and we take that attitude and apply it to all the problems and challenges in California, instead of just, kind of waving our hands and saying, yeah, California, is expensive to live, California is expensive to do business, I really feel like we can make some positive changes for our state. And, it gives me a lot of optimism. And I'm really excited to see how we're going to emerge from this pandemic better and stronger than ever.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I thank all our panelists here for giving us that initial insight. We're going to take some questions from our audience here that have been waiting to do so. And so I'm going to ask the staff to go ahead and read off a couple of questions for us. And I'd like each one of you to kind of give just a real quick answer to each one of those questions if you can.
California is losing numerous corporations. What are your solutions that you're all considering to mitigate this?
I'm happy to take that because that's one that comes our way all the time. I think that the story of our demise is completely overblown. There are always some companies that are either moving their headquarters while not moving their businesses. Yes, I'm talking to you, Tesla. They're expanding operations in California while moving their headquarters to Texas, whatever that means. And I think the same is true of a lot of other companies that continue to do everything from R&D to manufacturing in California. So I think there's way more companies that are growing, that are being born here, that are growing here, and that will continue to invest in. That's not to say that companies sometimes don't leave, and that's not to say that there isn't sometimes a challenging business environment. But I think if you look at the data, there is a lot less of out-migration of businesses and of individuals than the reporting might suggest. And I would welcome Sanjita to comment on this as well, because I know it's something that she has looked at. But look, we want every business to come here. We want every entrepreneur to start a business here. We want to help them grow it here. We want them to stay here. That doesn't always happen. There's a natural kind of ebb and flow. But the truth is we've had, again, more business starts, than any state in the country, a 20% increase in the last measurable year. We had 100 IPOs just this year. So those little companies turn into big companies that do things like create the technology we're using right now. That's a California-born company. So again, I hear you, Rob, and I hear others that we have work to do. But I think the idea that somehow the California dream is over and this is not a great place to do business, it is just not borne out by the facts.
I appreciate that, Director. Thank you very much. Samjita, do you want to go ahead and add on to that?
Yeah. So, as Director Myers had said, we do see like those negative news articles kind of get the attention, but in terms of what we're seeing in terms of business creation, in terms of job creation, we are continuing to lead the rest of the country, and I think sometimes people forget the opportunities that are here. If you are a entrepreneur or a business owner, really you want to be in this environment, this infrastructure that's already in place where you can pull ideas and from your peers, especially in the tech sectors up in the Silicon Valley and down in Silicon Beach, other businesses. At the height of the pandemic, we had seen a lot of scary news articles that people were leaving the state. California is so expensive, people are leaving. Yes, we have seen people leave the state, but in terms of what we're seeing, the majority of people have moved into like around the state. So they moved out of high cost areas into low cost areas. And so I feel like, the rumors of our demise are overstated a little bit. And so we are seeing some changes. And as Didi mentioned, every time a business, decides to leave, we get another business that's going to be the leader in the next decade or so. And then, if they leave, there is a natural ebb and flow to that. So I think that's nothing that is worrying me personally as a chief economist for the state at this point. I haven't seen anything that's really scary. It's just kind of the life cycle of businesses in California.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you on that. Being in economic development myself, part of two new groups, not new groups, but groups that are working on this initiative, New California Coalition, of course, being one of them, and Team California being the other. And so with the relationship with GoBiz and other departments, we can really change the narrative. And I think that narrative is going to be reflective of the work that we do, the inclusive work that we do at the local level, because it all starts at the local level and we build out. So creating those wins locally, I think is our best shot forward. Changing that narrative is a big part of the equation. And so I thank you both for being part of that effort. Micah, you have some thoughts on this?
Well, just quickly, what I'd like to see more of is business expansions from Silicon Valley in other parts of our state. That I think we need to collectively support. I know the Newsom administration and others have been working on that. And as we do, we need to wrestle with the fact that people will pay a premium to start their businesses in some of the most economically productive parts of our state. And we create $2 billion companies for every company that leaves. But what we don't work on enough is that the high housing costs relative to the price of living, the high energy costs are often just as high in other parts of the state as they are in areas where people will pay a premium to be there. So I hope that we all can work on having that business creation, that prosperity that comes along with it, more broadly shared in more regions of our state.
Well said. Thank you, Micah. Rob? We still have you on mute, Rob.
Sorry, I'm trying to be respectful of any kind of background noise to make sure that I don't interrupt my colleagues in any way. So my apologies. So I think we may have a little bit different context from our perspective on some of this as we look at it. And obviously, we all may have different perspectives or optics in how we look at some of this, but just a couple other points to broaden it out. But I think when you look at what's happening in real time with the state in terms of employers and our different job sectors, our policies are driving our economy to become dependent on certain sectors. Literally, we are becoming a high-tech state in terms of the preference for a certain job sector. That includes both biotech down in San Diego, as well as obviously tech through Silicon Valley and Silicon Beach. And as long as we grow those jobs, great, because as we know, in reality, over 40% of our state revenue, the surplus and the current revenue that we depend on, is coming from the tech sector itself. So the hope here is that we never slow down in tech, because if we do, we are going to quickly pivot into a massive deficit, of what we have seen, in other years and decades. So that's number one. Number two, as a result of that push towards, the recruitment, attraction, and really stimulus for growing those sectors, we are hollowing out other sectors that, people have depended on historically, who may not have a college degree, but are equally, invested in wanting to grow the California dream for their families and having cars and having a home and being close to where they maybe grew up. And where we've hollowed things out is in our manufacturing sector. We unequivocally are seeing them move, because we've talked to the other states, to Nevada and Arizona and Texas and other places. Now, do they make the headlines? No. But you talk about medium and smaller size companies moving? Yes. Now, why? Why is because when you look at our regulatory framework, one of the challenges that Mr. Weinberg talked about, we do have challenges, because if you are in California and you talk about speed to market, you have, you need to make changes in your manufacturing. You need to look at wanting to stand up a new plant and other items. It's very challenging in California to be able to do that quickly in relation to other states. That's where, that's just the reality. And it is a local issue as well, Mr. Chairman, but it is a partnership between the state and local levels. There's no mistake of why since we talked about Tesla, the battery plant is in Nevada. It's why? Because they were able to get it approved and moving forward within, in months, not years. Ideally, that should have been in the Central Valley in what we need to do. So it's not a criticism per se, it's just part of the fabric of what we face. And, there are other companies who are moving jobs to other states who don't talk about it. I know, again, we all have our stories. It's just, it does ebb and flow, but there are absolutely challenges that we have to confront if we want to maintain a broad-based economic sector and not grow, lower wage jobs in tourism, for example, and high wage jobs in tech, and then impact jobs in the middle, our middle class jobs. So that's one of the things that, we are under discussion about.
Appreciate that, Rob. Thank you. And staff, you have another question that you wanted to ask?
The iHub grant requires a 1-year total spend down of the funding. How do you anticipate this impacting inland or more rural regions that don't have large, already established ecosystems for technology in place? Is this an attainable and reasonable expectation of the program?
That, I guess, is directed to me. And, I am not the day-to-day manager of the iHub program, so I'm not sure that it has to be paid down in a year. I would be happy to go and get the answer to that. I'm not sure that that's entirely true across the program. So, but I will happily run the traps on that and come back to you with an answer. Or I know Araceli Capo Ramirez is on from my office, and she may be able to put it in the chat before this is over. And I actually have to sign off as I have another commitment, but I appreciate you all having me today and appreciate the questions and look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Thank you, Director Myers. We appreciate all your work and the governor. So thank you again for participating. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. You too.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion about the iHubs? I don't know how much either one of you are tracking that, Mike or Rob, Samjita.
Yeah, we see it, but I absolutely defer to Ms. Myers on that one.
Yeah, understood. Staff, do you have another question you wanted to ask the group?
What is the future of the workforce, and what should employers / small businesses expect and anticipate?
Who would like to start off?
Micah, do you want to go first?
That's a big question. I mean, where to start? What is the future of the workforce? I mean, I'll just call out a couple of things we've been tracking very closely. And one of them is that there was a lot of talk about a decade ago about there not being a skills gap, and that we mainly just needed to get people that have skills into the right jobs. There is and has been a massive wave of retirements that is going to accelerate here in the next few years. And so the future of the workforce right now is a workforce that doesn't have the technical skills that we're going to need across a range of different industries, including things like utilities. And these are really great, upper middle class jobs that can provide prosperity for families. And the future of the workforce is a workforce that's going to have different types of skills than they do now. To grab another question, there was a question about AI. AI, artificial intelligence, robots, automation does not destroy jobs. It changes jobs. And so thinking about the economic transitions that we need to make, whether it's as a result of artificial intelligence or as a result of, for example, the changes in the energy industry, moving people from oil and gas to more renewable forms, is something that we need to really make a much more substantial investment in if we want to have the workforce that is going to be powering our economy in years to come. And that investment is partially money, but a lot of it is reform. And a lot of it is reform of the community college system and their ability to quickly train workers for the skills that they need in order to be successful in a rapidly changing economy. So a lot to say about that, but I wanted to focus specifically on the fact that we're going to need a lot of people doing a lot of things, and in a lot of cases, things they are not currently trained in order to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, Micah. In the Central Valley, we have some programs that are pretty unique to training up into those jobs. And so to your point of they're changing, they're not losing an opportunity here. And I think having the resources to train a workforce to be a part of that automation is going to create new jobs and new job sectors. And so we're working on that in the Central Valley. And I hope that continues on through the community college network as well, because that is a key resource for access to those particular programs. So thank you. Rob, you have some thoughts on that?
Just a couple additional points. So, Mr. Chairman, we would make the argument that it's actually not just the community college system. It actually needs to start the high school system as well, and being able to build forward. The points are very well taken. We're gravely concerned coming out of the pandemic about where education is as a whole, for our kids today, for their learning, but then that learning is obviously the workforce of the future. So we don't believe yet that schools have, public schools in particular have caught up with where we need to be able to make up for where things have been, over the last year and a half to 2 years, given these incredible, impacts that we have seen. Number two point I would like to make clear, because we track this very closely, is that again, as we are transitioning to a renewable economy, that the green jobs that are being promised in a renewable economy are not yet in any way reflected in what has been promised. We keep hearing this overall number, and in the future, I want to talk to Ms. Mitra about some of this, and just compare notes. But we keep hearing this number of 500,000 jobs have been created, around our green economy policies to date. Well, that number's been used now for like 10 years. We keep hearing the same number. Now, interestingly, Next 10 came out with a report that we actually just started looking at yesterday, and they're talking about that there's going to be job growth of about 165,000 jobs total in the future around some of the green policy changes. Well, that is nowhere going to be, enough jobs for what's going to be needed for our population. If we are truly, those jobs don't pay anywhere near where some of the current jobs are when you compare them to, oil and gas, for example, in the Central Valley, on what that means for the families in the future as well. So some big, pieces here from a policy and economic perspective that truly have to be honestly looked at and worked on. And then, the last piece of that is, what does, Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, automation do? What really does it mean? Where is it going? Is it, we look at the ports, we have a big backlog, but a big part of the backlog is a concern about the current labor jobs on there because they're good paying jobs versus, if they get more automated. Do those jobs shift to other areas in the port to support the automation, or do they stop the automation and the advances of what it could mean because they need to keep those jobs? That's just one example, and then you can move that example across all sectors. We're seeing it at McDonald's, right? They're turning to all kiosk before you even get to the counter. So that issue is going to be really our future, confronting the equation of what that is and what it looks like. And it's not necessarily, it's not negative, it's a change. We all fear change at times. Change is uncertainty, but we want to ensure that we can obviously have jobs that can provide a future, particularly in the highest cost living state practically in the country, so people can buy homes and provide for their families. So again, lots to talk about here in the future of what you're bringing out. So thank you.
Absolutely. Great points. And especially on, earlier education in high schools, I think you're absolutely right. It starts there. You've got to create that pathway for students so that they know what their next opportunity is, whether it be junior college, trade school, what have you, traditional college. We just need to have those opportunities made available, but expose them to those opportunities early on. So a big believer in that. So thank you. Samjita, I would love to hear your perspective of this, from a data perspective. So.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. So, looking at it from the industry side of it with the workforce, we saw post-Great Recession, and we are going to see post this recession some structural changes in our economy moving forward. And one of them is the fact that, we are moving, pre-Great Recession, manufacturing used to be a really big, strong sector for California and the United States and the world. And it used to provide a middle class income for families, and that they were able to support themselves in a manufacturing in a factory. Those types of jobs just don't exist anymore. And, there has been some changes in that. And so we are also continuing to see those kind of changes in other industries now as well. we don't see retail sector recovering to pre-pandemic levels, but I do see those retail workers actually moving into other industries like warehousing and transportation, because that's just some changes in how people are shopping. So people are making changes. So the jobs go with where the changes are in consumer demand. We're also seeing a shortage of truck drivers. And I think for a long time, we've seen, a lot of news about automated trucks. We're going to have automated trucks that are going to be responsible for moving our goods from the ports inland. And, now we're seeing a shortage of truck drivers because they're seeing that. And so do you decide to grow up and become a truck driver when you think your job's going to be obsolete in a couple of decades? Maybe not. Yet we still need truck drivers today for that gap between when we have human truck drivers to automated truck drivers. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. And I feel like we are in that disconnected period right now where we're seeing long-term AI and automated jobs in certain sectors. But in the meantime, we still need those service sector jobs. We still need those service jobs. So I think, in terms of the workforce, California is a very adaptive, very progressive, very forward-thinking population. So as long as our workforce is, willing to jump from one industry to another, taking those skills with them as they move from one industry, I think they're going to continue to succeed regardless of what industry they're in. And it'll just be a difference of what they're going to do in the future moving forward. So.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you for that insight. We're going to go for one more question before we wrap things up here. So go ahead, staff, with one more question.
What is the strategy to reach underserved businesses in communities and populations that have traditionally faced barriers in accessing credit, capital, or other resources necessary to start and grow businesses?
I'll go ahead and let one of you choose to go first. Micah, did I see you turn your mic?
Micah, do you want to go first? And then, too bad Dee's not on here right now.
Go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think, again, I'm going to talk about the geographic diversity. There are lots of ways in which the credit market is structurally discriminatory that I think we need to address. And access to capital, we know, is very, very unequal, by race, by gender, by any number of other issues, but it's also unequal by geography. And so if you're, talking about, for example, venture capital, there was a question in the chat around the tech industry in Southern California. And it is certainly the biotech industry in San Diego is a major thing. But when you hear about, Silicon Beach or what have you, it is a very, very small fraction of the capital that is invested in companies in the Bay Area. And then if you're looking anywhere outside of sort of the major urban centers where so many Latinos now live due to cost of living concerns, among other things, there is just not the same access to capital to grow businesses. And so one of the things that I know the state is working on, I don't want to step on their announcement, but I know they're thinking about, is doing, sort of investment funds for outside of the, sort of major urban areas. So this is an area that I hope the state takes very seriously, and it's an area that's going to be essential to make sure that those small businesses that want to and can grow into large businesses, grow into community sustaining and family sustaining enterprises. And so I am excited that the state is thinking along these lines.
And Mr. Chairman, I would certainly agree with Micah. I don't think that we have seen such a commitment to the thinking and some of the initial planning on these issues than we have seen over the past couple of years. and again, with Mr. Weinberg leading part of that, but with GoBiz, with Ms. Myers there, it's been remarkable to actually see the networking that is being developed to be able to try and make progress on this issue and truly do it in a transformative way and bringing some of the best innovation that is part of California's culture in truly making a difference. Because as we know, without investment, there's nothing. And so, we are hopeful. We're seeing this in other countries around the world as well. India, for example, they're trying to do it all on their phones and making that opportunity to access capital and investment literally through your phone. And there's no middle person in that. It's right on your phone. It's remarkable too. Again, the thinking and then the potential. So we're actually, optimistic that there will be progress on this, because there has to be, right? If we're going to maintain our base here, there just has to be progress here. But the state has certainly the commitment to that, and the resources are there. We need to get more from a private sector perspective, but we look forward to more progress on this. I know everyone in the state is committed to that. So hopefully we will see that, as fast as possible.
Agreed. Absolutely. Sanjita?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, as Mr. Lapsley mentioned, the state is committed to reaching as many people as possible. At the beginning of the year, when the state was giving out the small business relief grants, one of the questions and one of the issues was, how do we reach the people who would need this grant money the most? And, so there was a lot of discussion, there's like language barriers, there's access to the internet grant if you don't understand the language that it's in. So there was a lot of, issues, and I don't think it's been 100% solved. So I would encourage anybody in the audience or anybody, if you have ideas, please do reach out to the Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, your local chamber, your local legislative representatives, and say, here's my idea to reach out to as many businesses as possible, because we are also looking for those possible solutions. And the people in the trenches might have the best ideas that we haven't even considered. So yes, please do. If you have ideas on how to do this in an equitable fashion, I'm all ears. The state is all ears about that. So I would appreciate that.
I appreciate that from all of you. Great wisdom here. And we're going to get to the wrap up here. But just wanted to say a few words to say thank you to each and every one of you. You provided tremendous insight for our members today. I hope that they gained a lot of knowledge, took a lot of notes, but if they didn't, it is recorded. So they will get an opportunity to watch it again, both in English and Spanish. So thank you to our interpreters today who took the time to follow this conversation and provide that translation. Certainly appreciate that, and our audience there as well. This is a great opportunity for the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to show what we're doing in economic development and policy and providing for our local members. It's truly a top-down, bottom-up approach. It takes everyone in between to make that happen. And we learn a lot from the local, but we need the leadership at the top to help implement it too. So it really ensures that, we're all working cohesively together. And I think that this is what this panel is reflective of. And certainly the information you provided today is reflective of that as well. And so we look forward to your continued partnership and creating equity and diversity and being inclusive to our economic approach here in California, and being top of our game when it comes to setting policy and ensuring that we're doing right by our small businesses. So again, thank you to everyone for your participation. Truly appreciate that. And thank you to all that attended today. Look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce prides itself on programming aimed at diverse and small businesses. As 2022 approaches, please mark your calendars for the following events. The California Legislative Policy Summit will take place on March 15th, 2022, and the 43rd Annual CHCC Statewide Convention will take place in August of 2022. Thank you for joining us at the CHCC Legislative and Economic Forecast, and happy holidays.